Hi, I'm Dr. Gunnarsson, and welcome to our podcast, TMJ Unlocked. I'm with TMJ Sleep Therapy Center of Utah, and I'm here with Mindy Lunsford, our myofunctional therapist. And we're here to talk about a new kind of a trending thing that's going on um, that has some really, really good health benefits. We want to talk about that and how that plays into what we do here in our office, and that is salt caves and how wellness ties into the use of a salt cave and that sort of thing. So or and what's interesting is it's something that is so ancient, has been going on for such a long time, and yet has taken a modern twist to it, in the use of salt caves, and in some ways can be a little magical in some ways. So
So let's talk about what a salt cave is. A salt cave is called halotherapy when you go through and enter into a salt cave. And back in ancient times, an actual salt cave was a cave that had salt in it, and miners would go in and mine it out. But the reason why this has kind of come into more modern um, medicine therapy type of a thing is because in Eastern Europe, they found that salt miners had unusually healthy lungs. And so, at its core, a salt cave or halotherapy is really simple. It's an environment that's carefully crafted with salt that you breathe in. It enters your airways, it penetrates deeply into your lungs, and it interacts with your skin. A lot of people find benefits with their breathing and their immune system response because of the salt caves. So it's like an adjunctive kind of therapy to kind of help calm, but it's a nice calm mood setting that is created. I'm excited for us to try one out as a group.
we plan on going as a group, and so we'll have to report back on another podcast about how was your salt cave experience. So sessions in a salt cave usually last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, just depending on the salt cave and where you're actually going. And so let's talk about and what's interesting is in those salt caves they take a mechanism and it's got micro, I mean, just small grains of salt is what it
Right.
is. It's diffused into the air, so it's kind of cool. So let's talk about that airway connection and how that diffusion is really really helping you. So, and that's where it gets interesting, especially for our world of TMJ therapy and airway, because those things are so tied together so closely that you really can't separate TMJ and airway at all. And so we're talking about airway health and TMJ. So salt therapy is believed to be anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and mucus clearing, which you wouldn't think. You would think
Yeah.
that it would make you a lot more stuffy, but it actually causes mucus clearing.
Yeah. I would have thought that, it would dry you out, but apparently it causes the mucous membranes to start producing more thin mucus lining.
Yeah. So what that means in real life is, like you were saying, it causes that thin, loosened mucus, that thin and loosening mucus secretion, so that breaks everything up in your sinuses. It opens your nasal passageways. It reduces airway irritation, and it improves breathing efficiency. And so some studies suggest it may trigger anti-inflammatory and anti-allergic responses in conditions like asthma and bronchitis. And so people who have asthma and bronchitis would really, really benefit from going to a salt cave because it has the anti-inflammatory and anti-allergic response um, effects on your body. So now let's connect that to your lane. Let's say if the airway improves, let's talk about how that connects to everything we do. If the airway improves, then nasal breathing improves. If nasal breathing improves, your tongue posture improves, which is Mindy's area of myofunctional therapy. And if so, then muscle tension patterns shift. Again, myofunctional therapy. And suddenly you have less clenching, you have less compensatory jaw tension, and you have better sleep quality because you have that a lot clearer airway. Like I said, those things are so tied together, and we work so hard in teaching our patients all about breathing through your nose and breathing through the nasal airway because that is so important to healthy living and wellness. And so let's talk about, or have Minnie talk a little bit about stress and the nervous system and how this all plays together with that salt cave.
So, even if you ignore the respiratory claims, salt caves are incredibly powerful for one thing, and that is to down regulate the nervous system. And a lot of it has to do with the way that they've set them up. You're walking into a room that is dimly lit, light music is playing, the air feels fresh, it's quiet, there's no cell phones, you're gonna be in a reclined position, and this naturally is gonna be shifting your parasympathetic parasympathetic state of your nervous system into that rest and digest. And so just that right there, just the setting of walking into it is something that does naturally to our bodies. That's just something that we need, or those calm settings. And that means stress increases muscle tension, and muscle tension worsens TMJ. Poor breathing worsens sleep, and salt caves can interrupt that whole cycle. So it kind of helps to set your body back into a balance as like an adjunctive therapy. I mean, let's be honest, it's not something that is going to cure. If you have asthma or bronchitis, it's an adjunctive therapy. You're still likely going to need to take the care um, of the medications that you're on, but you may not need to use them as frequently, or your symptoms may be less severe if you start adding an adjunctive therapy to help improve the symptoms.
I like that, and it's almost like we need to suggest that to our patients who come in to go do a salt bath. Go to a salt cave and have a salt bath and see what that is really like for them to help reduce that tension, that muscle tension in their face, to help with the inflammation in their body, help with inflammation in their jaw joint, which actually would help us in treating their TMJ. So let's talk a little bit about skin inflammation and the whole body wellness and how that all plays together. And so it it's not just about the lungs, it's not just about the airway and what goes on there, and it's not just about stress, but it also interacts with your skin and your immune system. And so salt has natural antibacterial properties and it has natural anti-inflammatory effects, which is why people report improvements in acne, eczema, and psoriasis. And the idea is that salt helps reduce the surface bacteria, it calms the inflammatory responses in the body, and it supports the skin's natural barrier balance. And so, again, science is still catching up to this. There haven't really been any actual studies, but the mechanism makes sense, doesn't it? In that salt caves can really benefit and improve our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, there haven't been any large scale studies, which is what medicine needs in order to catch up to what people are finding on these smaller scale um, experiences that people are having. So, what does the science really say? Let's keep it real. The research of the salt cave is promising, but it isn't conclusive yet. We, haven't caught up with those large scale studies of what modern medicine needs in order to be able to actually post articles on the health benefits of it, regardless of what people seeing or are seeing on small scale use. Studies show that it's going to improve your symptoms in respiratory conditions and reduce inflammation markers. It's also, you get better perceived quality of life just because you're feeling better in general. And we all know how just having a happy attitude, a happier mood, lighter feeling about life in general automatically helps improve quality of life with that as well. But there's also limited large scale trials that have been done on salt caves. So there's mixed results in controlled studies and a lack of a standardized protocol in order to get these large scale studies printed. But salt caves are best viewed as complementary therapy, not primary treatment. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their place in our use for our overall healing. They're not to replace a CPAP. They're not to replace an oral appliance or the medical care or medications that you may be taking for certain conditions, but they can absolutely support airway health, relaxation, and recovery.
Yeah, so let's see how this all fits together. Let's zoom out just a little bit and take a better, closer look at salt caves and let's check off some boxes here. Some things that salt caves do, and we've talked about airway support, nervous system regulation, stress reduction, inflammation modulation. And that aligns perfectly with a root cause wellness approach to curing diseases, especially when combined with myofunctional therapy, nasal breathing work, TMJ treatment, and sleep optimization, whether with a CPAP or with an oral device. And so salt caves aren't the solution, but definitely, like we've been saying all along, can be that adjunct that actually tips the balances and makes you feel better and makes you feel like the treatments that you're doing in those other areas are actually working. You're seeing some results, you're seeing some improvement, because you just need that other little piece of bringing into your life, whether it's that stress reduction, the anti-inflammatory benefits, and how that all fits together. So take that with a grain of salt
Huh.
as our take on salt caves. And we're excited we're going this week to try out a salt cave and see what our thoughts are. But just from what I've read and what our study had done for this podcast, it's interesting to tie all those things together and bring it all into perspective in how that can benefit our lives. I've always been skeptical about it. The staff tease me about that because they say we're going to a salt cave, and I laugh about going to a salt cave and having a salt bath, But I'm excited to try it out so that I can, point it out to our patients and how it benefited me and how it can benefit you and how it can benefit them. So thank you for joining us for this podcast. We appreciate your patronage and joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.